You people don't belong here, and you have no right to hold this wedding in our neighborhood. Victoria Hale's voice cut the afternoon in half. She stood at the edge of the manicured lawn, her expensive heels sinking into the grass, her face contorted into something ugly. One hand clutched her phone, the other stabbed the air toward the groom like a weapon. Nathaniel Cole stood motionless in the wreckage of what should have been the happiest day of his life. His tuxedo was ripped and smeared with cake, his shoes caked in mud, his hands trembling only slightly though he forced them to remain at his sides. Around him, wedding guests huddled in shock, elderly relatives clutching children close, friends in ruined dresses wiping tears, the air heavy with disbelief. The backyard looked like a war zone. Food tables overturned, the three-tier cake smashed to paste on the stone patio, flower arrangements shredded into confetti by someone's hateful hands. The laughter of an hour ago had been replaced by sobs, shouts, and the shrill venom of one woman determined to destroy what she could not stand to see. And yet Nathaniel's voice was calm. "Ma'am," he said, his words clipped, steady as steel. "I think you should reconsider that phone call." Victoria sneered, lips curling, and pressed the phone to her ear. "I'm calling the police right now," she shrieked. "They'll drag you and your ghetto friends out of here where you belong." The dispatcher answered, and Victoria's tone became theatrical, almost gleeful. "Yes. Hello? There's a gang gathering at my neighbor's house. They're threatening me. I saw weapons. Send every unit you have." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Nathaniel glanced at his bride, Emily Carter, her white gown stained with food and dirt, her face streaked with tears. Then he looked back at Victoria with something that made her falter for half a heartbeat, a faint, knowing smile, because she had no idea who she was really talking to. And what happened when those police cars arrived would change everything. 3 months earlier, the scene had been entirely different. It was a bright Saturday morning in Magnolia Heights, the kind of morning when sunlight glinted off polished windows and gardeners clipped hedges in perfect silence. Moving trucks lined the driveway of the grand stone estate at 247 Magnolia. The new owners worked side by side, sweat on their brows but laughter in their voices. Nathaniel Cole, 32 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, lifted boxes with easy strength. He was not a man who liked being fussed over. Born in the Oak Hill district, the son of a postal worker and a school cafeteria manager, he had carved his life out of grit, scholarships, and relentless effort. Now, improbably, he was governor of the state. Yet no one watching him that morning would have guessed. He looked less like a politician than a neighbor lending a hand. No entourage, no security detail, just a man carrying boxes into the home he had bought with his own savings. Emily Carter, his fiancée, was directing movers with the quiet authority of someone used to high-pressure environments. At 29, she was already a respected pediatric surgeon. Her father, Samuel Carter, a master mechanic, had sacrificed everything to see his daughter through medical school. Emily had worked nights, borrowed heavily, and pushed herself harder than anyone thought possible. She had the steady hands of a surgeon, but her smile softened everything. That morning, she and Nathaniel looked like any other young couple chasing their dream, a peaceful life, a beautiful home, a wedding to look forward to. But behind lace curtains in the Victorian mansion next door, Victoria Hale watched with narrowed eyes. At 58, Victoria was a woman unraveling. Hale Construction, the family company she had inherited, was hemorrhaging money. She had a critical meeting scheduled in 3 months, with Governor Cole himself. A state infrastructure contract worth millions was her only hope of survival. She hadn't met him in person yet. To her, Governor Cole was just a name on paper. And now, through her window, she saw a young black couple laughing as they planted flowers in their new garden. Her jaw tightened. Where others might have seen love, success, or simply two people starting a new life, Victoria saw only a mirror reflecting everything she was losing. Her bitterness curdled instantly into resentment. The first meeting between neighbors came on a Tuesday afternoon. Victoria approached with a plate of cookies and a smile that looked forced, brittle around the edges. She wore a pearl necklace, as if to armor herself in tradition. "Welcome to Magnolia Heights," she said, her voice sharp beneath its polite coating. "I'm Victoria Hale. I've lived here 20 years. This neighborhood has standards." Nathaniel, ever the diplomat, extended his hand warmly. Nathaniel Cole. "This is my fiancée, Emily. We're excited to be here," Emily added with a genuine smile. "We've heard so much about how peaceful this community is. We can't wait to raise a family here someday." Victoria's eyes flicked over their expensive car, the movers unloading tasteful furniture, the obvious success they carried with quiet pride. Her forced smile thinned further. "And what do you do?" she asked, her tone laced with assumption. "I work in public service," Nathaniel answered simply. "Emily is a pediatric surgeon." The disappointment on her face was barely hidden. These weren't tenants she could dismiss as temporary or unworthy. They were educated, successful, rooted. They belonged. And that was precisely what she could not accept. From that moment, Victoria Hale became obsessed. She cataloged their visitors, noted the delivery trucks, and scrutinized every laugh that drifted across the lawns. Where others might hear joy, she heard defiance. In her mind, they were flaunting themselves, mocking her decline. When she learned they were planning a wedding at their estate, her fury deepened. "They're changing the character of this neighborhood," she hissed to anyone who would listen. "Property values will plummet. Magnolia Heights isn't meant for people like that." Her voice dripped with disdain. Her friends nodded uncomfortably but said nothing. Victoria's resentment hardened into a campaign. Small acts at first, complaints to the homeowners association, whispered rumors, exaggerated claims of noise. But bitterness rarely stays small. It festers, feeds on itself, grows until it spills into every word, every action. And for Victoria Hale, it was only the beginning. By the end of that first week, Nathaniel and Emily still believed they had found their dream home. They walked their garden hand in hand, laughing about paint colors and honeymoon plans. They spoke of family, of legacy, of building something together. They had no idea that the woman next door was already plotting to destroy it all. The week leading up to Nathaniel and Emily's wedding should have been full of excitement. Instead, it became a slow-motion ambush. It started on a gray Monday morning when the florist's delivery truck rolled up to 247 Magnolia Heights. Buckets of white roses and hydrangeas swayed in the back as the driver stepped out, clipboard in hand. But before he could reach the gate, a silver Lexus blocked his path. Victoria Hale leaned out her window, her voice dripping poison. "Wrong neighborhood for your kind," she snapped. "This address doesn't exist. Turn around." The driver frowned. "Ma'am, I've got the invoice right here." "The order is for the Cole residence." "There must be a mistake," Victoria insisted, her eyes sharp as broken glass. "People like that don't live here. Now leave before I call the police." The florist, confused but unwilling to risk trouble, called Nathaniel directly. Minutes later, the governor himself walked down the drive, calm as ever, and signed for the flowers. But the damage was done. The man's hands trembled as he unloaded each bucket, his eyes darting nervously toward Victoria's house. It was the first cut in a week of 1,000 wounds. Tuesday brought the musicians. A string quartet rehearsed quietly under the backyard gazebo, their bows gliding over strings. Emily sat nearby, her eyes soft, imagining the melody that would carry her down the aisle. But within minutes, Victoria's voice pierced the air. She stood on her porch, cordless phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, city noise department. I need to file a complaint. There's an urban party going on next door, blaring music, disturbing the peace." The quartet stopped, their notes dangling awkwardly in the air. The musicians exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to keep playing. Emily's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She forced a smile at them, but her hands clenched in her lap. Nathaniel stepped over, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Let her call," he whispered. "We have permits. We're within the law. She can't touch us." But Emily could feel the joy of the moment bleeding away, replaced with unease. By Wednesday, Victoria had shifted tactics. She began targeting the vendors directly. One by one, she tracked them down with phone calls laced in false concern. "Hello, this is regarding the event at 247 Magnolia." She'd begin smoothly. "I thought you should know. It's been canceled due to criminal activity at the residence. Police are investigating. It's not safe for your staff." Some vendors hung up quickly, unconvinced. Others hesitated, wondering if they were walking into trouble. Deliveries were delayed, appointments rescheduled, whispers spreading through the wedding industry like oil on water. The wedding planner, Esperanza Moncler, had seen plenty of difficult neighbors in her 20 years, but nothing like this. By midweek, her clipboard was a battlefield of crossed-out names and emergency replacements. "This woman is completely out of control," Esperanza muttered, storming into Nathaniel's study. "Governor, I don't care who you are. We need to call the police." Nathaniel shook his head, jaw tight. "Not yet. If we escalate, she wins. This is our home and our wedding. We'll stand our ground." His calm steadiness impressed Esperanza, but Emily's eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Thursday evening, the strain cracked the edges of their composure. Emily sat on the porch swing, her gown sketches forgotten in her lap. Her eyes shimmered with exhaustion. "Maybe we made a mistake moving here," she whispered. "Maybe we should have stayed in the city." Nathaniel knelt in front of her, taking her trembling hands. "Emily, listen to me. We earned our place here. No one gets to drive us out, not with slurs, not with lies. This house is ours, this wedding is ours. And we're not running." For the first time all week, she let herself believe him. But Victoria was not finished. By Friday, her resentment had metastasized into open vandalism. Under cover of night, she crept across the property line. With deliberate malice, she tore down ribbons tied to fence posts, ripped flowers from their beds, and scattered decorative stones across the walkway. When Emily stepped outside at dawn, the sight stole her breath. The elegant arrangements she had dreamed of for months lay shredded at her feet. Her grandfather, who had just arrived from across the country, bent to help clean up. At 80, his hands shook, but he insisted on replanting what he could. That was when Victoria appeared at the edge of the driveway, her voice venomous. "Go back where you came from, old man. You don't belong in America, let alone this neighborhood." The elderly man swayed, nearly collapsing. Marcus Reed, Nathaniel's foster brother, caught him just in time. Emily clung to Nathaniel, sobbing into his chest as the words hung heavy in the morning air. Inside, Esperanza snapped photographs furiously, documenting everything. "This isn't just harassment," she said, her voice tight with rage. "This is criminal, and when the time comes, we'll have proof." The neighbors watched, but most stayed silent. Some peeked from behind curtains, shame flickering in their eyes. A few whispered quiet words of support to Nathaniel and Emily, but none dared confront Victoria directly. Silence, Nathaniel thought grimly, is its own kind of complicity. That night, alone in his study, he sat at his desk, surrounded by torn ribbons and ruined flowers salvaged from the yard. He stared at them for a long time before speaking softly to himself. "I swore to serve all the people of this state, even people like her, but I never imagined that hatred could be this personal." Saturday morning arrived clear and bright, the wedding day. Emily rose before dawn, her stomach knotted with nerves that had nothing to do with vows. As makeup artists and hairdressers bustled around her, she tried to focus on joy, on love, on the promise of forever. But outside, Victoria Hale was preparing her final assault. At 6 a.m., She marched across the lawn with the fury of a storm, one by one. She demolished every decoration within reach. Flower arches reduced to splinters. Banners snapped in half. Welcome signs stomped into the mud. Esperanza arrived at 7 to find Victoria still tearing ribbons from the fence. "Ma'am, this is private property. You're committing vandalism," she shouted. Victoria's eyes burned with wild rage. "This is my neighborhood. I won't let these people turn it into a ghetto." The words hung in the morning air like a curse. By noon, the guests began to arrive. Families of every race and background, dressed in their best. Children giggled as they clutched gift bags. Elderly relatives adjusted corsages. The scent of fresh-cut roses tried to mask the sour stench of Victoria's garbage hurled over the fence. At 2 apiece, under what remained of the flower arch, Nathaniel and Emily finally stood hand in hand. Their vows trembled with emotion, but rang clear in the bright air. For a moment, it felt as if love might conquer the weak of hate. And then Victoria began to scream. From her yard, she shrieked insults at the top of her lungs. "This is a respectable neighborhood. Take your noise and your people somewhere else." The guests shifted uncomfortably, trying to block her out, but her voice carried, sharp and unrelenting, slicing through the sacred moment. Then came the breaking point. Victoria climbed the fence. Her designer dress tore on the iron, but she didn't care. She stormed into the reception like a tornado, hurling food tables to the ground, smashing the 3-tier cake Emily had dreamed of since childhood. The racial slurs that poured from her lips were so vile that parents covered their children's ears. Guests recoiled, horrified. Marcus Reed tried to restrain her, but she clawed and spat like a wild animal. And then she pulled out her phone. Right there, standing in the ruins of someone else's joy. Victoria Hale dialed 911. "Yes, hello," she cried, voice theatrical, desperate. "There's an armed gang gathering at my neighbor's house. They've got weapons. They're threatening to kill me. Send every unit you have." The dispatcher's calm voice asked her to describe the weapons. Without hesitation, she invented more lies. Guns, knives, machetes. They said they'll burn down the whole neighborhood. Guests gasped. Children clung to their parents. Emily collapsed beside the ruined cake, tears streaming, her gown stained with icing and dirt. Nathaniel stood in the center of it all, still as stone, his tuxedo torn, his hands steady, his eyes sharp with something Victoria couldn't name, because he knew exactly what her lies would bring. Sirens were already wailing in the distance. The storm was just beginning. The sirens grew louder, slicing through the warm afternoon like blades. Red and blue lights flickered against the elegant Victorian homes of Magnolia Heights, casting eerie shadows across the shattered reception. Guests froze in place, breath held, as squad cars screeched to a stop outside the Cole residence. 4 vehicles, doors slamming, boots pounding pavement. Officers spilled out, hands hovering near weapons, eyes scanning for threats. They had been told to expect an armed gang. Guns, knives, machetes, violence. What they found instead stopped them cold. A wedding in ruins. Elderly grandparents trembling in their Sunday best. Children hiding behind overturned tables. A bride with mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching the remains of a smashed wedding cake. And at the center, a tall black man in a torn tuxedo, standing like a pillar amid the chaos. Officer Reginald Thorne, a 20-year veteran, blinked hard. For a second he thought dispatch had given him the wrong address. This didn't look like a gang war. It looked like a hurricane had ripped through a family celebration. And then Victoria Hale came running. "Thank God you're here," she wailed, throwing herself toward the officers with all the theatrics of a stage actress. Her hair was wild, her eyes blazing. "They threatened me. They said they'd kill me. They have weapons, guns, knives, machetes. Arrest them, all of them." Her finger jabbed toward the wedding guests, spittle flying with every word. The officers glanced at one another. They saw frightened families, not criminals. They saw no weapons, only ruined flowers and toppled chairs. Doubt flickered across their faces. "Ma'am, calm down," Officer Thorne said evenly. "Tell us exactly what's happening here." Victoria doubled down, her voice climbing to a shriek. "What's happening is a gang takeover. Look at them. They don't belong here. They're criminals, all of them. Arrest them before they burn the whole neighborhood down." A hush fell over the wedding crowd. The only sounds were the sobs of children and the hiss of the summer breeze against shredded decorations. And then Nathaniel Cole stepped forward. Despite everything, the destroyed wedding, the humiliation, the racial slurs hurled at his family, he carried himself with a calm dignity that silenced the yard. His tuxedo was torn, but his presence was unshakable. "Officers," he said in that measured, resonant voice, "I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding." Something about his tone made Officer Thorne hesitate, the authority in it, the weight. He studied Nathaniel's face, searching his memory. Where had he seen this man before? The voice, the bearing, the quiet command. It was unmistakable. Recognition struck like lightning. His breath caught, his eyes widened, and with a voice that carried like a gunshot, he spoke the words that froze the entire street. "Governor Cole!" The air turned electric. Guests gasped. Officers stiffened. Even the children sensed the gravity of the moment. "Governor!" The man Victoria Hale had just called a criminal, a gang leader, an animal, was the sitting governor of the state. Officer Thorne's hand shook as he reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Thorne. I need immediate verification on Governor Nathaniel Cole's location. Urgent." Static crackled. Then a stunned voice replied, "Governor Cole is not scheduled for public events today. No security detail assigned." "Why do you ask?" Thorne swallowed hard. His eyes never left Nathaniel's. "Because I'm looking right at him, and we were just dispatched on a call accusing him of leading an armed gang." The silence that followed was deafening. Behind them, Victoria staggered back as though she'd been struck. Her mouth fell open, words choking in her throat, her face drained of color. "Governor?" she whispered, disbelief clinging to every syllable. No, that can't, you can't." But the murmurs spreading through the crowd confirmed it. Guests began to realize what had just been revealed. The man whose wedding had been destroyed, the man accused of being a criminal, was the most powerful person in the state. Nathaniel's eyes never wavered. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply looked at Victoria with the calm of a man who knew her world had just crumbled. "I'm the man you're scheduled to meet Monday morning. Miss Hale," he said quietly, "the one whose signature you need for your contract. The man you've been calling an animal all week." Her knees buckled. She clutched her head, shaking violently, gasping for air. The realization was too heavy to bear. Her hatred hadn't just destroyed a wedding, it had destroyed her future. And as the officers turned toward her with cold professionalism, the sound of handcuffs clicking into place seemed to echo across the neighborhood. The tide had turned. Victoria Hale's hatred had backfired spectacularly. The metallic snap of handcuffs echoed like a gunshot. Victoria Hale, the self-proclaimed Queen of Magnolia Heights, stood stunned as Officer Thorne read her rights. Her wrists were pulled behind her back, pearl bracelets snapping as it hit the ground. Neighbors gasped from their porches. Guests stared in disbelief. Children peeked through trembling fingers. It was a sight no one had expected. The woman who had spent decades wielding power through money and intimidation, now reduced to a criminal suspect under flashing red and blue lights. "Ma'am," Officer Thorne said coldly, "you are under arrest for filing a false police report. Vandalism, harassment, and destruction of property. Given the racial nature of your actions, these charges will carry hate crime enhancements." Victoria tried to protest, her voice shrill, desperate. I didn't know who he was. I was protecting the neighborhood." But her words fell flat against the silence of witnesses who had heard her slurs, seen her violence, felt her venom. Too many eyes, too many recordings. Her lies had no air left to breathe. The crowd parted as she was marched toward the patrol car. Some shook their heads and others whispered in awe. A few pulled out phones, live streaming every second. The internet was already watching. By evening, the first news van arrived, then another, and another. Magnolia Heights transformed into a media circus, satellite dishes sprouting like weeds on the manicured lawns. Reporters shoved microphones at anyone willing to speak. The headlines spread faster than wildfire. Racist neighbor destroys governor's wedding. Hate has consequences. Construction CEO arrested in Magnolia Heights. Meltdown clips of Victoria's tirade went viral within hours. One video, showing her smashing the wedding cake while screaming slurs, had 10 million views before midnight. Another, of the exact moment Officer Thorne recognized Nathaniel Cole as governor, became an instant cultural flashpoint. By the time the evening news rolled around, the whole nation was watching. Inside the Cole residence, the atmosphere was heavy but resolute. Guests gathered in the living room, comforted with tea and blankets as Marcus Reed handed out tissues to crying children. Emily sat in her ruined gown, her father Samuel's arm around her shoulders. Nathaniel stood before them, still in his torn tuxedo, his face calm though his heart ached for the day that had been stolen. Cameras flashed outside the window, but his words inside were steady. Today was supposed to be a celebration of love, he began, voice carrying like a steady drumbeat. Instead, it became a reminder of how far we still have to go. But let me tell you this, hate did not win today. Hate will never win in this house. The room, bruised by chaos, found strength in his words. Meanwhile, Victoria's empire crumbled in real time. Blackthorn Construction's website crashed under the flood of outrage. Social media pages filled with furious comments, boycotts, and memes mocking her downfall. By Monday morning, 3 major contractors cut ties. Suppliers demanded immediate payment, and her board of directors called an emergency meeting. The company's stock plummeted. The state contract she had clung to as her last hope was suspended indefinitely. In a single weekend, decades of business reputation vanished into smoke, and her mugshot, smeared makeup, haunted eyes, the hollow look of someone who had lost everything, was plastered on every screen in America. Reporters crowded Nathaniel's driveway, shouting questions as he stepped out in the evening light. Still in the tuxedo that bore the scars of the day, he faced the cameras with a composure that made headlines of its own. My wife and I began this day ready to celebrate a covenant of love, he said. Instead, we faced hatred and destruction. But hear me clearly, what was meant to humiliate us has only strengthened our resolve. Hate will not define this marriage, this family, or this community. Justice will take its course as it must, but I hope this day reminds all of us that our choices matter, words matter, and actions carry consequences. He didn't gloat. He didn't spit her venom back at her. He simply told the truth. And in that truth was a kind of power that no shouting neighbor, no false report, no hate-filled campaign could ever match. That night, Victoria sat in a holding cell, her designer clothes replaced with county-issue scrubs. The woman who once looked down on everyone now sat on a metal bench, head in her hands, sobbing quietly. The fall had been so fast, so brutal, she could hardly breathe. She replayed Nathaniel's words in her mind. I'm the man you're scheduled to meet Monday morning. Her entire life, business, reputation, identity, had been reduced to rubble by her own hatred. And she knew, deep down, there was no one else to blame. For Nathaniel and Emily, the night ended quietly. The ceremony they had dreamed of was lost, but their vows still held. In the privacy of their bedroom, Emily wept as Nathaniel held her close. This was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, she whispered. It still can be, he murmured, kissing her forehead. Because no matter what she did, no matter what was destroyed, we're still here, together, and that's all that matters. In that moment, amid the ashes of chaos, love endured. But outside their walls, the story was just beginning. Victoria Hale's name was already trending worldwide. Her trial would grip the public, her downfall would become a symbol, and Nathaniel Cole's response, measured, dignified, unshakable, would redefine leadership in the eyes of millions. The wedding was over. The war for redemption and justice had begun. 3 weeks later, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Every seat was filled, reporters scribbling notes, cameras rolling outside, community members waiting to see justice handed down. Victoria Hale shuffled to the defense table, shackled not just by chains but by the weight of national disgrace. Gone were the pearls and tailored dresses. She looked small in plain clothes, hair pulled back without care, face hollowed by sleepless nights. The charges were serious: filing a false police report, vandalism, harassment, destruction of property. And because her attacks were racially motivated, each charge carried hate crime enhancements. Her lawyer whispered frantically in her ear, but Victoria barely heard him. The roar of her ruined reputation was louder than anything in that room. When the judge entered, silence fell. "All rise." Judge Patricia Williams, sharp-eyed and deliberate, presided with gravity. She listed the charges one by one, each word hitting like a hammer. "Miss Hale, you face up to 7 years in prison." The air tightened. Then the courtroom doors opened. Nathaniel Cole walked in, tall, composed, every eye drawn to him. Emily followed, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her gaze steady despite the memory of a ruined wedding still raw in her heart. Reporters leaned forward. This was the moment. Would the governor demand the harshest sentence? Would he press down the full weight of the law? When the judge invited him to speak, Nathaniel's voice filled the room with quiet authority. "Your Honor," he began, "I stand here not as a politician, but as a husband whose wedding day was destroyed. I have every legal right to ask for maximum punishment, but I believe punishment alone cannot heal what hatred has broken." A ripple of surprise spread through the gallery. "I request that Miss Hale's charges be reduced to misdemeanors, provided she accepts strict conditions, 6 months of community service in the very neighborhoods she has disparaged, mandatory sensitivity training, and accountability through mentorship programs where she must use her business experience to uplift those she once despised. Her contract with the state will remain suspended until she proves, through actions, not words, that she has changed." Gasps echoed. Even Victoria lifted her head, eyes wet with disbelief. Judge Williams studied Nathaniel for a long, quiet moment. "Governor, you are asking this court for mercy on behalf of the woman who desecrated your wedding." Nathaniel nodded. "Because justice should build bridges, not just walls. If we want a better future, we must show people it's possible to choose love over hate, even when hate feels easier." The judge's gavel struck. "So ordered." Community service stripped Victoria of her illusions. Her first day at the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center. She stood frozen outside, clutching paperwork with trembling hands. Inside, children laughed, volunteers bustled, and neighbors worked side by side. The world she had mocked as beneath her was thriving without her. Her first assignment, cleaning bathrooms, on her knees, scrubbing floors. She tasted humiliation, and something else she hadn't known in years: humility. The director, Dr. Angela Washington, made the terms plain. "One wrong word, 1 ounce of attitude, and you're gone. This is their space, not yours. Earn your place." Victoria swallowed hard and nodded. Day after day, she scrubbed, cleaned, swept. Faces glared. Some spit words at her under their breath. "Racist. Animal." She didn't defend herself. For once, she listened, and slowly, the cracks in her armor widened. 3 months in, Dr. Washington handed her a different task. We're launching a small business mentorship program. You've got decades of experience. Time to use it right. Her first mentee was Marcus Thompson, a 25-year-old landscaper with big dreams but little guidance. He entered their first session stiff, arms crossed. "Why should I trust you?" he asked bluntly. "You called people like me animals." Victoria didn't flinch. "You're right not to trust me. I was hateful. I was wrong. But I'm not asking you to trust who I was. I'm asking you to watch who I'm becoming." He studied her, then slowly opened his notebook. That moment was the first step of her redemption. From Marcus to Elena Rodriguez, a young caterer, to Destiny Johnson, a 19-year-old single mother with a dream of starting a daycare. Each mentee chipped away at Victoria's prejudice. They forced her to see not stereotypes, but human beings with grit, hope, and potential. And for the first time in decades, Victoria felt purpose that wasn't tied to money, power, or appearances. 6 months later, back in Judge Williams' courtroom, the transformation was undeniable. Marcus testified, "She taught me how to bid contracts. I've hired 5 workers now. I wouldn't be here without her." Elena added, "Her mentorship helped me open my restaurant. She believed in me when I barely believed in myself." But it was Destiny's words that silenced the room. "Miss Hale helped me start Little Dreamers Daycare. More than that, she proved people can change if they're willing to work for it. She didn't just teach me business, she showed me that forgiveness is real." Tears streamed down Victoria's face. She had no defense left, no pride left, only gratitude. Judge Williams turned to Nathaniel, who had once again appeared in the gallery. "Governor, do you believe Miss Hale has fulfilled the conditions of her sentence?" "Yes," Nathaniel said without hesitation. "She has proven that redemption is possible." The gavel fell. Charges reduced, state contracts restored, beginning with one modest project, building a new wing for the community center. Exactly 1 year after the ruined wedding, the Coles hosted a neighborhood barbecue. The backyard, once smeared with cake and venom, now overflowed with laughter. Marcus showed off pictures of his landscaping crews. Elena catered the event. Destiny brought her toddler daughter, Hope. And there, in a simple sundress, serving plates of food with quiet humility, was Victoria Hale. Emily caught Nathaniel's hand as they watched the scene unfold. "Maybe this is what real victory looks like. Not destroying your enemies, but helping them become better." Nathaniel squeezed her hand. "Hate destroys everything it touches, but love transforms." Victoria approached them at dusk, voice soft. "Thank you, not just for today, for believing I could change when I didn't believe it myself." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "You did the work. You chose it. We just gave you the chance." The 3 of them stood together, not as enemies, not as governor and disgraced neighbor, but as people bound by a story larger than themselves. And so, what began as a wedding destroyed by hate ended as a community rebuilt by grace. A reminder that redemption isn't easy, but it is possible. That sometimes the most powerful answer to prejudice isn't punishment, but the courage to forgive. Love had turned ashes into hope. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes hate can't be changed. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and type the word respect if you believe love is stronger than hate. Let's spread stories that heal.